Adesso proviamo a vedere come va.
Hello, it's nice to be back talking to you again on the 1st of May. Traditionally the new beginning, traditionally a day of demonstrations and issues. I've been away a little bit because there's been a lot of activity. It's been quite busy and there's been a lot of debate, as you would expect. A lot of people looking to find their way, a lot of people curious as to which aspect of the information that they're receiving makes most sense to them. And I do try hard, and sometimes people don't quite get what I'm saying. I did put a post out earlier saying that Matt Hancock, who is the British Health Minister, was very keen on pushing for mandatory vaccinations, and a lot of people wrote back and said, that's 6 months old, Simon. The point is, what I'm trying to say is this is the man behind it. This is the guy that's pushing it. And you are aware of the new legislation which was enacted on the 27th of April. And it's no coincidence that this was done when Boris Johnson, the British Prime Minister, was recovering from coronavirus and his girlfriend was having a baby. So they sneaked this legislation through when he was not present. Now that tells us a great deal that he actually isn't aware of it. He probably didn't at the time even know about it. And that's why I used the name Matt Hancock. Matt Hancock in 2019, just before this virus outbreak, was pushing quite heavily the concept that we might have to, as a government, force the British people to have mandatory inoculations or vaccinations. So please, first of all, be aware that this was brought in when the Prime Minister was not on his watch. He was not on duty for very obvious reasons. And people are saying, what's the situation? Well, you can write a petition. You can write to the House of Lords. You get sort of 100,000 signatures. You can get, it debated. I don't have a lot of faith in that. I'm old enough to remember the poll tax riots in Great Britain when the then Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher decided that she would move away from the normal system of a rateable value, how much tax basically householders paid to their local government, their local councils, to provide local services. And they changed the system and they called it a different sort of tax. And there was a massive outpouring. Young and old refused to pay it en masse, and there were demonstrations, and frankly the demonstrations that took place in the poorer areas, the authorities did not bother about at all. But finally the organisers, it was a very loose group of organisers actually, it was mainly just a general outpouring of individuals, but realised the only way to do anything was to have a demonstration in the central part of London where the money is made. It's either the banking sector or it's the retail sector. And so literally thousands of people turned up to Leicester Square, Piccadilly Circus, Oxford Street, and it turned nasty and there were running battles with the police, and it was very violent. And the result of that was that then Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher was removed from office and the tax was removed. So what I am saying is, if anybody comes to my door and says, we're going to forcibly vaccinate you, I will fight them. I will physically fight them. I don't know if a court is going to do any good, frankly, but the only way is to physically resist. And that's exactly what I would do. So people have asked me what's my position on it. That's my position. I will physically fight anybody who turns up on my doorstep with a hypodermic needle and says, I'm going to vaccinate you. No, you're not. So that's my position on that. So yes, by all means, sign do this and do that, but ultimately this is only going to be changed either by massive public disobedience, or Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, saying, what's all this about? I never authorised this, do away with it. It literally is going to be one or the other. So there's that one. Let's talk about President Trump now. It's exciting because he came out and said in a press conference, yeah, I've seen evidence that tells me that the virus, this COVID-19, was created in a laboratory in China, in Wuhan province. Now, his own scientists are saying, no, that's not the case. The reason for that, of course, is his scientists work for the World Health Organization. They're part of the cabal. They're not his military doctors and scientists who are independent of the black hats. His civilian staff, of course, have years and years and years ingrained within the satanic, kabbalistic, you want a pension, don't you? So you keep playing the game and we'll give you a pension at the end of it. So that's why they're disagreeing, because the president is getting his information from the security services, from the military, and the doctors are getting their orders from China and from the World Health Organization, and ultimately those people who want to sell you a vaccine. But he has come out and said, look, this virus has come from a laboratory in China, and he said that. Now, I was telling everyone that weeks ago, that this was a operation to destroy the President of the United States and to destroy the economy of America. The whole point of this was not to destroy half of the world's population. And those of you who have got the time can go back and look at my presentations, and I made it very clear that this virus that we're dealing with is incredibly infectious, but actually its death rate is quite low. And I'm on record as saying that. Incredibly infectious, but very low death rate. Because its object was to create panic. And I'll say again what I said, for those who perhaps have missed it, that the virus was never intended to be released in China. It was intended to be released in America for the economic and the political collapse it was expected to bring. The black hats, for want of a better word, tried to remove the president through the Russian collusion scandal. That proved to be nonsense, didn't work. So then they tried to impeach him. That didn't work. They've tried to murder him. Assassinate seems a very clean word, so let's just use the real word. They tried to murder him and the First Lady on several occasions. Maybe the First Lady once, but on him several occasions. All have obviously failed. So what are they left with? I'll tell you what they were left with. They were either left with the opportunity of a dirty bomb, that's a low-yield nuclear bomb that creates an awful amount of dirty fallout, or the virus. They went for the virus because it's a much cleaner way, and they don't have access to those nuclear charges that they had some 10, 12 years ago. So this whole thing was supposed to be released in America, probably in New York, probably. And the resultant calamity, political fallout, and huge economic damage would have caused the president to be removed, or at least to lose the election. That's the whole thing. This was all about that. Now, honestly can tell you that it wasn't about vaccinations at that point, because had it been about vaccinations, the light of Gates and all the other people who have a vested interest in vaccinations would have had billions of stockpiles of vaccine ready to roll out, but they haven't. They've only got enough for their own people, which is probably about 100,000 shots. That's something that they've had to cobble together quite quickly. Most professional doctors who we can trust have said that a true vaccine is probably 12 months to 18 months away. And so that's really sort of the situation as it's unfolding. And we're looking at the main battle in terms of getting information to the people being the media. The media are the real problems here. And from what I am understanding, if President Trump wins the election on November the 3rd, then he will turn his attention to the world's Kabbalistic media. Can't really do it at the moment because, as a believer in fairness, he wants an election. He's not a dictator. And if he were to do what he needs to do to the media, so many people would say that he's just doing it to, take over and stop free speech and this, that, and the other. So what is decided is that the battle with the media will be after the election. That's presuming that he's re-elected. The economic situation is pretty difficult in America, but not impossible. And I think, as a commentator looking from Britain into America, that he will be judged by how quickly the economy recovers. So we've not got long before the election on November the 3rd, but there is enough time for him to show that he can do what's needed to do. But of course the cabal, the deep state, the New World Order, they will do everything they can to hold up America's development. I do want to try to really hammer this point home, that the cabal, the deep state, are absolutely hell-bent on preventing President Trump returning to office. Whether you like him or not, he is one of the few obstacles left to a New World Order takeover. Doesn't matter whether you wouldn't take tea with President Trump or, do this or do that. That's not the point. The point is that he's about the only thing that's standing between this mass vaccination, because he'll never sign that. It'll never happen in America. Why do you think a very short time ago, American nationals in many countries were told, come home, come home. Actually told them all to come home, because he doesn't want them in a position where they're in a country where they might be forced vaccinated. And if somebody said to me, well, don't go down fighting, Simon, we'll give you a job over in Iceland, or we'll give you a job over in wherever I go, because I'm not going to stay and be vaccinated. I don't fancy getting a bullet in the head, but I'm not going to compromise my principles. So the United States, through President Trump, offers just about the last bastion fighting against these people. I know a lot of people got very upset with President Trump because they wanted him to disclose, UFOs, aliens. They wanted him to take down the cabal in a direct way and talk about 9/11. Unless you're in government, unless you're sitting in the White House, unless you're in the Oval Office, unless you actually know these people, you don't perhaps appreciate that this satanic force is incredibly powerful. Mr. Gates is the wealthiest man on the planet. Her Majesty the Queen is the wealthiest woman on the planet. These individuals can bring down governments. They can actually bankrupt countries. And unless you have a real experience, and I don't just mean sitting around a game of Monopoly and playing real estate games, unless you actually understand, because of your experiences, you can't conceive that a group of individuals could wield so much power. See, if you're a good person, you don't threaten death to somebody. You don't threaten blackmail. You don't say, well, we'll kill your children, or we'll kill this sister, or we'll do this. If you're a good person, you don't do that. If you're a good person, what you've got to do is find the evidence, go to court, and you may or may not get a conviction. But that's not how the New World Order works. That's not how the cabal works. They'll try and buy you. If they can't buy you, then they'll try and blackmail you, threaten you. And if none of that works, they'll kill you. So no wonder so many people in middle and higher management do what they're told by these people, because they know the good side won't kill them. They know the good side won't go and run their children over, break their kids' legs. But they know that the cabal will do that. So when you are trying to fight against this, you can't just walk in dressed in shining armour, because you've got to get people to turn against the cabal. You've got to get people to look inside themselves and say, can I do what's right here? So President Trump is standing a few months away from an election which he may or may not win, and it's of the highest significance. And we'll move on for that with the situation in Michigan. You've been seeing the reports that a large number of what we call patriots descended on the state building, which was guarded by police, of course, and they basically wanted an end to the lockdown. They wanted to go back to work. They felt that the virus was being overplayed, which it is, of course. And a lot of the lawmakers or politicians were there with bulletproof vests on. So they were ready for that. So it just shows what's going on, that both sides are weighing up. And what was really interesting for British people to get our heads around was that these demonstrators, there were only a few hundred, there weren't thousands, there were a few hundred, but they were carrying guns. And the police didn't attempt to take the guns away from them. So the police formed a cordon, a line, inside the building, inside the legislature, to separate these demonstrators from the actual politicians, the lawmakers. But at no point did the police try to disarm the demonstrators. And that's very interesting. That's a really interesting point. Something that if you're not in the country, you don't understand. Why would we? And the point is that it is reaching a boiling point in some parts of the US where the Constitution is being tested. And that's a really interesting point. So I wanted to just say that we should expect more of that. And this is how change occurs when, remember, Americans are armed. We don't have guns in this country, and most Europeans don't. And that's why we can be pushed around. It's very interesting, isn't it, that when all this gun malarkey was set up, and it was all a deep state operation, schools and shootings and all the rest of it, and there's a big call that said, we've got to take guns away from people. Well, some of the states decided they'd arm their teachers, and of course everyone's up in arms, aren't they? Oh, you can't have guns in classrooms. Well, what's interesting is I'd like you to, if you have the time, have a look and see how many schools that have armed teachers have actually had shootouts. It's very interesting. There's one airline where you're allowed to carry a gun. It's in South America. And there haven't been a single hijacking because all the passengers carry guns. It's an internal flight that's allowed. So there's an interesting argument here that America doesn't get pushed around in the same way that other places do, because you can't push 325 million people, many of whom are armed. And so I'm not an apologist. I think it's a very important part of the Second Amendment. Is a very important part. All right. So were children really saved from this underground base in the New York area? The answer is yes. And there have been other places in Italy where this has happened. All I can report is because all I've been told is that these operations were largely successful. The cabal actually withdrew from a number of the bases when they realized that overwhelming force was coming their way. They did not attempt in those particular locations to have a shootout. They withdrew their major assets. Is it true that when children were brought to surface, they died? That I can't tell you. What I can tell you is that a number of children who, when brought to the surface and saw sunlight for the first time, went into some sort of apoplectic fit. I don't know whether they died. I was not given that information, but they went into shock to be out in the open air. All right, that's what these evil satanic people do. They abuse children. And I was quite disappointed. I had hoped to be in the United States end of last year, had desperately wanted to invest, and of course with the virus and the lockdown, that wasn't possible. And it's something that I want to rectify. And those of you who keep your ear close to the ground might know that there's a possibility that I will be going to the US this year. Certainly, I want to go before November the 3rd. So I'll talk about reserves. The US reserves have been activated again. The official line is this is just part of normal operations, normal routine troop movements. The underlying rule is no, it's not. There's an activation of a number of specialist units which are being masked or covered by general troop movements, and they're rotating some special groups because the ongoing battle is not yet over. Just talk about CC now. The new bioshields with the wonderful logo, as designed by Becky, of course, the infinity symbol, saying connected consciousness. The vast majority of you should by now have received your new bioshields. Please don't ask to transfer the other ones and have a swap. Some people are saying, okay, well, I've got my George Dragon bioshield, now I've received my CC one, can I send the other one back and get another one? No, you can't. Remember, the second one was free. It was buy one, get one free during that key time if you did it through my site. So, very fortunate that the BioShield company is prepared to do that with us. And any more products that ever come out from them, I will be looking for a similar sort of deal, perhaps not the same, but some sort of deal that allows spiritual people to benefit from whatever might come out. So, what I would ask everyone is please try and be a bit calmer. I'm not saying hysteria, but there's a lot of panic now rising. There's a lot of mixtures of energies, and I understand that. But this is not the time to lose our head. This is exactly what the cabal want. They want a divided and fractured community. I'm talking about the spiritual community. They don't care about the sheep. They can just make the sheep do anything they want. It's us, the free-thinking people. We mustn't be divided. We must be quite clear and quite strong. So, we've got to be balanced in our view, and we mustn't be running around crazy. But at the same time, we mustn't just sit back in an armchair and say, oh, well, there's nothing we can do, or let's just wait. I don't believe in that. I think we have to wait for the right moment, and then we have to act. That moment is approaching. It's not yet with us, but it's approaching. Now, there are some people who are saying that some of these advocates of the forced vaccinations are calling it the final solution. If that's true, then those of you who've done your history know that some very evil people, we call them Adolf Hitler, we call them the head of the SS, Reinhard, Heinrich Himmler, and Reinhard Heydrich. Heydrich was assassinated in 1942, but Himmler and Heydrich, who drew up what's called the final solution. This was not just the killing of the Jews, it was killing of anybody that didn't agree with Nazism. But basically it was predominantly to kill the Jews, and it was called the final solution. And I am understanding that some of these advocates of enforced vaccinations are calling it the final solution. So what they actually mean is it's the final solution to kill off the human race. So the virus wasn't designed to kill off the human race, but the vaccine probably is. That's why we have to resist it totally. Totally. So okay, there we go. Please try and stay grounded. Try and because everyone's watching about 10,000 YouTube updates or 10,000 videos or information from here and information there, and your head will explode basically. And I'm not saying don't obtain the information. Of course you must, but let's try and we've seen over the last few years how government or systems have attempted to chip away or eat away at our rights. And sometimes they don't seem to matter, sometimes they do. Well, this is it now. The cabal clearly either don't care because they feel so strong, or the age-old rule that we have to tell you what we're going to do before we do it, otherwise it don't work. So here we go, we're being told, aren't we? Forced vaccinations. And Great Britain is supposed to be the mother of all democracies. That's fun, isn't it? So I'll do some more updates. We need to do a proper show and take all your questions, and I will do that. But I just want to thank you. Thank you for, keeping grounded, keeping control of yourself, not getting overexcited. I don't mean it in a patronising or a rude way. Is that if we become too stretched, then we're not strong, and we need to be strong because the final battle hasn't happened yet. The final battle is coming, and I can't tell you when that is, but when I know it, I'll tell you. So thank you.